We are going to get started with a panel about dispatches from industry, moderated by someone that I've been fangirling over for probably a decade, Cynthia from Gastropod, best podcast on food. If you haven't listened, you really, really should. And she's going to be getting into it with a bunch of founders. So I welcome everybody to the stage now.
Always important to check if the mic is on. Mic's on? Mic's on. Yeah. Great. It is absolutely wonderful to be here, and I am really excited to have this conversation. The challenge for me is going to be that I'm going to want to ask questions for hours, but I will ask some of my own and then obviously open it up to all of you. And so the way that I want to start this is I want to ask each of you a question that will kind of allow you to talk a little bit about your company and why and what, and then we'll kind of get into more specifics. So Aryé, I'll start at the end with you. You are the co-founder of Wildtype, which has developed technology for cultured fish, starting with salmon, and I was fortunate to be able to taste an early version of it in sushi form about 1.5 years ago for a Gastropod episode. And so when it comes to the cultured meat space, why fish? Why is this a good solution for the world and for entrance into the market?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you so much. It's so incredible to be here. I feel very lucky for a lot of reasons. It's, I think, been a rough year for many of us, and to be able to come here and talk about a positive, optimistic future and one that is built on science is something that I'm just truly appreciative of. So thank you. Why fish? I mean, first of all, if we were to think about fish as one species, it's the most consumed by humans and in the world. Another aspect of it is in the United States specifically, if about 80 to 85% of our seafood is imported. And so when we hear about things like the bans that we might talk about, for example, this is made in America seafood. This is something that also is a unique opportunity to just not have to deal with all of these pervasive contaminants that we accept, all of the heavy metals and antibiotics and parasites and microplastics and all of these things. And so for those reasons in particular, we were drawn to it. And then finally, I'd say that just as a scientific challenge, there's so little that was known about the fundamentals of fish developmental biology that it was so fascinating for us to really get our minds into the lives of these cells and start. And we've never looked back since that day.
Which is awesome. So, Stephen, I'm going to turn to you. You're Vice President of Science Technology at California Cultured, and you are also working on cultured foods, in this case coffee and chocolate, which I think most of us were able to taste just now. It was delicious. So why cultured plant products and why these particular ones?
So first of all, is this working? There we go. Yeah. So as you just mentioned, everyone loves coffee and chocolate, so why not? I mean, it's 2 billion people across the globe use those products daily, so a huge market. And then the other part is that I believe, and I think there's technical challenges as well as consumer acceptance challenges that is facing the cellular agriculture industry that plant cell culture can really help us overcome. And so putting this forward as a product can help educate consumers as well as and crack some of the technical nuts that are really hindering us from getting to the mass market and introducing some of those externalities, positive externalities that we want to see, like animal husbandry and environmental impact.
So one of the issues that companies working in the cellular space have faced is one of texture, and that's obviously something that you don't have to deal with when you're talking about coffee and chocolate, and that actually leads very well into Mike. And you are Lasso.
Yes.
Is a local company focused on texture. You are the new CEO. Yes. Why is a new texture technology important in the food space?
Yeah, so I think, Lasso, and I was here last year when we have a brand, Tender Foods, which is our plant-based meat brand. Now we've kind of introduced an idea over and the ability to introduce new applications beyond just our original plant-based meat product tender. And so the company is a scientific spin out of a lab at Harvard that really focuses on taking simple raw material ingredients and using centrifugal force to spin them into really highly dense nutrition with extraordinary texture. And I think when I look at food in general, where a lot of the issues that I think people complain about is rooted in we're using machines to make most of the food we buy in the grocery stores that was invented 100 years ago, originally intended for industrial plastics. And so these are giant Play-Doh presses that smush ingredients together and use food glues. And we are able to take something that is really efficient, high throughput, great for the planet, and weave nutritional ingredients together to make great texture. And texture matters when you're talking about consumer acceptance, satisfaction, and that eating experience, that when you bridge from extraordinary science or an intended nutritional content, the way you get people to buy it and eat it every day is that they have a pleasurable eating experience. And so what we've tried to do with the underlying hardware, and we're more of a process technology focus with all of our approach, is how can we create that really satisfying eating experience and think about category applications to increase the breadth of the possibility there.
So I want to talk a little bit about pivots. And first, Mike, I'd like to start with you.
Pivot corner.
Yeah, because you had started out, the technology had first been used for something called tender, as you mentioned. Improved texture in alt meats. You can still get that, as far as I know, down the street at Sauce and Go Market.
Yes, Sauce.
I have had the products. They're delicious. But now it seems like from when we were chatting that you're pretty much leaving that market behind. And why is that?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been CEO of the company for about 14 months, and I think, especially in this audience here, people have been on the whole journey of plant-based meats, and prior to this, I worked in plant-based dairy. What a journey in these categories. And I think we've even talked about it a bunch internally of, just because the first application we made with the technology didn't turn into a massive commercial success, is that a problem? Is it a failure? Tricky question, right? And we were able to fund the company and develop patents and great technology off the back of the wave of that investment in that category. And a lot of things didn't work out for a lot of really amazing companies, people that worked incredibly hard, great science. And I feel fortunate. When I joined, the question was, this technology is really special. We've made one product, one category application with it to this point. Is that the only thing that, if you take a step back, because you can get really dialed in on, I don't want to call it just the nuts and bolts of making one thing and really trying to perfect it. And if the science is good enough, we believe that boy, it would be sad if that's the only thing you can make with this technology. And did we build a machine that is a plant-based meat machine, or did we build a machine that is a high protein, high fiber texture machine? And if that's the case, can we look at what other categories in snacking, in other applications across the grocery store that maybe have different dynamics, growth, size, consumer acceptability, that allow us to take underlying magic of what we built and try to turn it into something else? And so, it's been a journey. There's a whole bunch of internal parts of how you lead an organization through that change and kind of wrapping your head around it, and then working with investors and attracting capital behind that idea. Because the truth is, and we've talked about this internally, I think a lot of people here in the audience would know this, one of the real reasons you have to do a pivot like that is there was no money for me to continue raising on a small scale plant-based meat company in the year 2025. That path is over. A pure play plant-based meat company, and there are companies that are way bigger and way more far along the path than I am, that there was no money for them either in that. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but you got to deal with that reality, I think, a little bit too. And so if we can turn this into, that doesn't mean the company's a failure, and that doesn't mean we can't figure out something amazing, but let's figure, what else can we do? And that's what we've been on, really, really, the journey of the past year.
And I want to talk about capitalism because I think it's fascinating. But before we get there, I have another pivot I wanted to discuss. And Aryé, you have pivoted from sushi to lox. And I am curious about why and why do you see that as a better entrance for the market?
Well, aside from it being the food of my people,
And
say that that smoked salmon. When I sometimes will describe frontiers of science, there are things like consciousness and artificial general intelligence, and how to get to life on Mars and things like that, and then there's the flavor and textural profile of raw salmon that feels like it's even beyond all of those things, that is so infinitely complex and so difficult to recreate, and something that we've been absolutely fixated on from the beginning and still feel like we're truly in the earliest days. There are a couple of reasons why smoked salmon is the next thing. For those who tried our original Saku product, I think some of the textural issues were ones that, just being honest, we weren't able to completely address. And we developed a completely different technology to then overcome those. And in doing so, realized that actually one of the best applications for it was the flavor profile we're able to achieve with smoking the product as well. And it just worked, and that's kind of the scientific thing behind it. It was just an experiment that seemed to really work, and that's how we ended up there. I mean, there's a business case also to be made for value-added products like smoked salmon, as opposed to something that is, not. But that's we just followed what people seem to really like.
And so, talking about the market, Stephen, what are the first products you see as your entrance into the market, and why?
Great question. So our first product is going to be a high flavanol cocoa powder that is, and flavanol, as many of you know, is what makes dark chocolate healthy or good for you. And there's been numerous different studies for many years, all scientifically published, on the health benefits of dark chocolate. So the high flavanol cocoa powder that we're producing first will be our entry into the market. Behind that, then we'll have conventional cocoa powder, coffee, and cocoa butter. Those products are in different stages of development and discovery, and poses different challenges for us. But high flavanol is one that will allow us to your point about capitalism, charge a premium, and then use that profit to put back into our R&D to then beat down the COGS for our next products in line, as well as then reduce the cost of the high flavanol to increase our profit margin.
So I have a philosophical question for you all, and I'm going to go back to capitalism now. Is there a fundamental mismatch between what you're all trying to do, or what the space is trying to do, and kind of the system that we have? There have been some really prominent companies. Obviously, in any new space, there's going to be a lot of companies. A lot of them are going to go out of business. Like, that's not necessarily new, but we've seen some pretty prominent examples recently. Meaty's not doing so well. The big build out with Believer, and as Mike, as you said, the money is drying up. But these are things that are so capital intensive, and the science is so fascinating, right? But there's so much that goes into it. Is there a need for slower capitalism that can be patient and steady? Like, what is the kind of, is there a mismatch? Is there a way around this mismatch?
I think there's a fundamental mismatch, and I think that if we imagine what the broader mission of recreating a food system with 21st century values and everything that we need to really be sustaining, if you imagine the magnitude of that, of course that's going to be mismatched. We all knew that would be mismatched from the beginning. And yet, I think that the slower capitalism also won't work when there are projections of there being more plastic than fish in the ocean in 2050, and all of these other species that are going to be extinct by then. And so there is an intense urgency. And so, I think like many of us in the room, we've done what we can with an imperfect system, recognizing that we would need to deliver on capitalism-driven goals, and that's still, I think, what we're doing and what's going to keep this moving forward. For sure, we're in a place right now that feels like, I wouldn't say it's a valley of disappointment, it's a valley of kind of what's next. People feel like they've made the investment and want to see what is coming back from it. And I think that what will come out of that is the kind of hope and optimism, because if you play the tape forward otherwise, in the case of seafood, are the oceans going to be any cleaner or more sustaining in the next 20, 30 years otherwise? Is it getting any better? Of course not. And so I actually don't know what the world looks like without some of what we're creating here actually working.
Anyone else? Yeah.
But I'd like to add to, similar to what Jan and Mike were talking about earlier, I mean, our future still has to have industrialized farming. We're in a capitalistic society, and those incentives are there, and those are something that we're going to deal with, and our generations from now are going to deal with. What we need on top of that is everything that this group is here for, is a new innovation that can give consumers new choices, and that is super important.
I mean, building at any size of a venture is extraordinarily hard. And I think that there is a mismatch for and especially when in certain cell culture businesses, so many of the people that are in this room, that journey of the technical development, the amount of money, the intensity of the intellectual rigor that is required to build the scientific foundation to build these businesses is so intense. And that mismatch of capital probably feels very jarring. At the end of the day, also, like when I think about our business, and you need to, the money comes in to generate a return on the other end. And these businesses are hard enough as they are. So can you make it easier on yourself by trying to create a business that has, plays in a category that is large, understandable, growth trends? Where is your business model in that? That part, you as an entrepreneur, I think also need to own that part to be able to make it easier on yourself to generate a business at the end of the day that is going to be able to be sufficient on those things. So it is mismatched, but I also think that it's easy sometimes for founders or for small companies to kind of wave their hands in the air and say, they don't understand the journey. Well, true, but also you have to it is also on you to create a business that has a pathway towards sufficiency and return so that you can stand on your own 2 feet at the end of the day as well.
I have another couple of questions, and then I'll take some of them. Stephen, you're a real evangelist for taking this technology and turning it to plants. And I'm wondering why. What do you see from the science side and from the market side?
Thanks for that. I think plant cell culture is actually the ugly stepchild of the cellular agriculture world. And if you Google cellular agriculture, everything comes up cultured meat. But we're really forgetting precision from fermentation in the plant cell culture. Plant cell culture offers so much advantages to cellular agriculture as setting precedents for where cultured meat needs to go. And I think that really is the advantage here. And the precedents I'm talking about are two different things. First of all, the technical. Those are, can we scale it? Plant cell culture has been scaled to more than 75,000 liters. And then can we reduce the COGS? Plant cell culture is exceptionally cheap compared to animal cell culture. And then you have on the other side, this is societal and the consumer demand side. I think that the yuck factor is going to be much less of a problem for plant-derived products for food rather than meat, just because the complexity is much less. And then also you have this societal pushback that we're seeing from the Cattlemen's Association that is, plant cell culture products have avoided that completely. So I think there's a lot of advantages, and I would love to have this audience, participate more in plant cell culture and really use that as a stepping stone to help us give cultured meat and precision fermentation more time to mature and come to those COGS and consumer acceptance.
Can I just add that, as someone in past businesses that had cocoa powder as a major component of my bill of materials and my supply chain, that is one of the worst and gnarliest, awful commodities to ever have to be involved in. And from it, it's worse in 2025 than it's ever been before in every respect: price, availability, quality, before you even get to the horrific ethical elements of how so many of those products are sourced globally. And so the work that companies like yours are doing to like try to architect a new future in there, both can be incredible business and provide a like meaningful public good. And having lived through those things of having to make really tough choices about how much, like where do we source our cocoa from and things like that in the past, like just an incredible compliment to like just trying to do that work.
Thank you.
And feel free also keep your questions. I'll be looking up on occasion, and also on my iPad. So if you have questions, please let us know. And Aryé, there are some questions for you. If lox is if there's any particular advantage in texture, and then also if you could see kind of going to an ingredient rather than full food, kind of seeing like other options for getting into the market.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the textural advantage, I think it was more just around how it was created more than anything else. I don't think there's a specific textural advantage that's inherent to one application versus another. I mean, I didn't mention this for why salmon as well, is just the culinary versatility. Even a question like that wouldn't really exist for something like mackerel, for example. And so when we thought about what is a great model to be working with for cellular agriculture in fish, that's one of the reasons for salmon. And for an ingredient company, absolutely. And but it's dictated by the economics. So one of the things is that in our production, there's always some trim waste, and so we've looked at ways to incorporate that into perhaps things like cream cheese, or we've had discussions with pet food companies, for example, and obviously the branding would need to be pretty different, but that's something that absolutely we've looked into, and I think that all of these should be considerations when we think about a holistic production process.
And so, Mike, I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what it is that you are using the technology for now, and why those, and how it's an improvement over. You said, we're using these technologies from 100 years ago. So what does this technology have to offer, and how are the food products different?
Yeah. So, and I mean, there were some good questions about like, how do you know it's time to? I mean, we had made a single application of a really delicious shredded plant-based meat that we sold around in Boston, and really like when I've worked in consumer packaged goods for the last 20 years, and you look at honestly how food is changing, and I think it is honestly one of the single issues that Americans can actually agree upon today. Of they think their groceries are too expensive, and they're incredibly concerned about ultra processed foods and junky ingredients in their food, and how things like GLP-1 drugs, I think, are going to fundamentally change the way Americans shop in every category across the grocery store as those get more accessible and lower in price and become more ubiquitous. And so what we saw is, if you're kind of hitting your ceiling against the head on our head against the ceiling on our plant-based meat growth, what other categories would benefit from the fundamentals of what this fiber spinning technology can create? High protein, high fiber, and clean label. Well, let's start looking at snacking applications, because that is a giant category and like, I used to be the brand manager of Doritos. I love Doritos. I can't eat those anymore. I just can't, for a bunch of reasons. Like, they're so delicious, yet like categories like that are fundamentally changing. Can we make something that's high protein, high fiber, and clean label? Can we do something with, we have so many parents of little kids on our team, or in our company, and they're constantly feeding their kids fruit snacks, and they're like, this is just like junk, sugar, gum, there's no nutritional value? Can we do something where we take an upcycled fruit ingredient and add protein and fiber with clean label that kiddos want to eat? So like, let's make it a little bit easier on ourselves to then being like the first ones through the door of a brand new category that is just getting hammered right now. And can we go into a space that is big, growing, where we play to the strengths of the technology to try to create own branded products and do third-party license agreements to flow volume through the pipes of our machine, get utilization, and create market traction and commercialization. So we looked at snacking is awesome, candy is awesome, pet food is awesome. For us, big, growing global categories where the fundamentals of can we take simple raw material ingredients that we can flow through our machine and create texture and cohesion without having to do pressure binding food glues like you need to with high moisture extrusion machines, it has been really, really well received. And we kind of like introduced Lasso as exactly the same issue, you know, that you had of like, Tender couldn't be the brand for plant-based meat and also a third-party license for someone else. I needed to create something above that that represented the enterprise technology platform that allowed me to launch own branded pieces and do a third-party license with somebody else's brand and say spun by Lasso on it. And so we leveled that up, and that has given us freedom of movement to be able to like take some of those reservations off the table that people are having, try to make new, interesting, novel food.
And there's a question from the audience about creating consumer demand. And maybe, you know, all of you are certainly going to be facing this, and maybe, Mike, you can even talk about this from Oatly, where you had been before. But it doesn't, the point is that it doesn't seem to be like environment and sustainability are enough of a driver of consumer demand. And so how do you create consumer demand for these new products that will have a huge impact on the environment and sustainability and food systems?
I think people could disagree with me. In 2026, leading with social good and environmental impact is a tricky sell to the if you're trying to do you will find your people, but if you're looking for scaled ubiquity and impact, unfortunately, I think for many of the hearts and minds, like, I don't know that that is the thing you need to lead with. Like, I think that needs to be a reinforcing benefit for people who are seeking that out. Well, absolutely, you will find your people, but I think that, you know, things in food, you're leading with like does it taste, like taste, texture, efficacy, price, like, and I think there's ways of introducing that with Oatly. I was the first employee for Oatly in the United States. We built the oat milk business when no one had ever said the word oat milk before. There's a whole legacy there of how do we affect, you know, the impact of the dairy industry on climate change, but we didn't force that on anybody. We really just tried to make a better latte for you. And if you could do that first and then you appreciate the benefits, you kind of pull the mission through. And that 2017 was a very different moment culturally, in at least at this moment in the United States, than where we are at in 2026 in terms of leading with those values from my perspective.
Yeah, and Stephen,
Can I
Aryé?
add into, you know, I really think that taste is going to be the number one driver for consumer acceptance. And then beyond that, you really have to bring what's important to the consumer home. And for us, and when we think about our product, cocoa powder, a lot of cocoa right now comes with a very heavy load of heavy metals. And then you can start having the conversation with your customers about, you know, the health benefits beyond just the flavanols, but the safety of it, and reduce the amount of heavy metals in their diet.
Aryé?
I mean, it's a very similar thing in seafood, obviously, and you know, one of the things that I remember saying in the Texas legislature as they were contemplating passing the ban was, hey, if we want to make America healthy again, what about taking out all of the heavy metals and antibiotics and all those things again? And we all know how that went. I think that these things can feel like abstractions, and maybe something that doesn't is having people that are not us speak about it. And it's one of the reasons why for us, we've worked with chefs from the beginning, have wanted chefs to be the voices that introduce this. And to some extent, it's certainly made a difference. I think that the larger, just to be successful in a broader sense, we probably need to lean more into the selfishness of consumerism, just to be very honest about it. And that can be whatever aspect is a unique proposition of that product. And it's probably very specific to whatever it is. It could be heavy metals in some cases. It could be the fact that it's cheaper in others. And that is ultimately, I think, how the food system can be shaped and shifted into what we're working towards.
Well, I want to follow up with you with a different topic, which is something you and I chatted about before. And you talked about the importance in this sector of not just scaling up, but scaling out. What do you mean when you say that?
I think one of the interesting aspects of a technology like cellular agriculture is that for a long time, people were just kind of like, oh, what volumes are you working with? Like, what size tanks do you have in your facility? And when we think about traditional agriculture, if you want to create 20,000 tons of beef, you don't create a 20,000 ton cow and then chop it up. It's the same with iPhones. You don't make one huge one and then cut it. We need a way to kind of scale this out. And as we start to achieve I see the Edamambre team over here nodding, because this is exactly what they and others are working on. Is how we can make a sort of modular, scaled out version of this that is able to achieve the kinds of textural complexities, everything that is about the specificity of what we're creating for each product in something that is not just some enormous slurry that somehow gets turned into to these different products. And so that's, I think, one transition that this field generally is still kind of still approaching, but one that will be really transformational. I mean, for us, just thinking about to produce 1% of all the seafood in the world, I don't know if this number is like, we did this calculation roughly, could be a bit untrue, but the order of magnitude is we'd need all of the steel tanks in the world to do that. And so there needs to be another way. There needs to be other ways to innovate the production of this for a larger scale.
So there's a question there, Stephen, for you about regulatory hurdles for cultivated plant products like chocolate and coffee. Is it different? Where do those? The question is, does it require FDA approval? But what do you face in terms of regulatory approval?
Yeah, it is very similar, except that since we don't have an arbiter or we don't slaughter anything, we aren't dealing with the USDA. So everything is going through a GRAS notification with the FDA, and they're primarily concerned with safety, of course.
And Aryé, there's a question for you about your commitment to policy involvement and how involved Wildtype has been both at state and federal levels on behalf of the whole cultured meat industry. How important has that been, and why has your company been playing such a big role in this?
Thank you to whoever wrote that. I think this comes from a place of the Martin Niemöller, like, they'll come after us, if we don't stand up for what we're, trying to do and stand up for the others who are working towards this. And not showing up when there are bans being proposed and supported based on misinformation, based on special interests that actually are not conflicting with what we're creating, and just trying to even when we knew it was a losing battle, to just be there, to us just came from a place of conviction and felt better to have been there, even when they're past that, than to just kind of say like, oh, this is probably something that we can deal with another day, because then there's, like where it goes from there, we all know. And so it has been an important thing for our company at least, and others. I wouldn't say it's certainly not just us. It's actually something that I think has really united all of the companies working in this space and brought us together in very, very like, special ways to discuss things that I think were not like conversations that we wouldn't have had in the early days when people were so protective and wondering, you know, who else was going to be around in 5 years. It's been a pretty beautiful thing, actually, out of the adversity.
So someone in the audience is wondering about this question of bankruptcy and availability of funding, that there are, you know, other meat companies that have gone bankrupt, and how that affects funding. You've all said that the funding, you know, Mike, you said the funding is totally different now than it was. Yeah. And, you know, I know, Aryé, you and I talked about that, and that's been an issue for you too. How do you combat this today? What do you do?
I mean, the question was like,
there's a big shrug.
Did it impact the availability of funding? Yeah, it impacted the availability of funding because, I mean, look, like, especially, well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Like, I mean, why did those companies go bankrupt? Like, what is the category like growth and dynamic there? Is there a demand for this product that's going to flow into things? When one member of an investment committee at any of the funds you're talking to had a bad experience with a plant-based meat flyer they took 3 years ago and got burned on, when you start an email with like, hey, I'm Mike from a plant-based meat company in Boston, it's like delete, like that, like you don't even, like there, it's a non-starter in a lot of those cases, much let alone like, I mean, then, you know, no one's putting money into my company to put $10 in today on the hopes of getting $12 back in 6 years. Like they want to see the growth prospect on those things. And so to the extent that big funded public, you know, very, you know, kind of tricky companies like went out of business, like that dampens the expectation of outsized returns into the future, because you have to really then say, why are you different than them? And then you're really kind of like parsing an argument. So it makes all of it trickier, and that is in no way meant to shade or be a detriment at all to the people that have like gone through those like, that's terrible. Those people are super smart, built great businesses, worked really, really hard, and I've been there of having to build factories that don't go the way you thought they would, or more expensive. That stuff is so hard. And so did it affect the rest of the industry? Yeah, it did. And so part of that is like, can I reframe the conversation for the technology that I have and talk about other things? Because unfortunately, we got to a place in 24 and 25 where like nobody cared about the like throughput or the COGS or the opportunity that we had in plant-based meat, because just saying that phrase was a non-starter for a lot of funds. And so that is tricky. And so that takes time, and I think it does require a handful of like markers of a new path to reframe that opportunity to open the door for other great people to walk through, and it probably changes timelines and trajectories, my opinion.
I don't know if you meant it this way, but this kind of brings it back to full circle for turning that mismatch into a match. And I think we're at a special place where we can show potential investors that now perhaps the valuations for these companies are more in line with that reality and more matched to what it is. The addressable market hasn't shrunk in those intervening years. It's far greater, and it's only going to get larger. Like the costs and current investors now who are just maybe looking at this for the first time can now benefit from all of the cost reduction that's happened, all of the upfront technology that's been developed, even understanding where the failures were and advising companies to build from that and or to avoid these other things. And so actually, I think the way to move from this is to appreciate that there is a match here. I mean, there's a real fundamental paradox here. I haven't felt such strong conviction that this whole field will work as much today as I ever had. Like this is, you know, it works. It actually does work. And yet the paradox is that all these companies are running out of money, and we certainly are not exempt from that. This has been a harrowing last year. I, in many ways, have felt hollowed out from what we've, you know, endured, even after FDA approval and everything like that. And I think that the way to move forward is actually to show that now maybe there's more of a match than there was when the reality hype delta was so insane.
I can just say there's like a short memory on those. Sorry, it's like there's a short memory on those things too, because I have friends that founded egg alternative companies that were really struggling, and then all of a sudden there's an avian bird flu epidemic and egg prices are through the roof, and there's an availability. Suddenly, that is the hottest investment sector that could ever happen for them, and they can't turn away the inbound emails. So it's a problem until it's not. Like plant-based meat is an issue until the price of beef is extraordinary, and you reframe the whole idea from a like climate change solve into a protein maximization play of affordable protein maxing, especially with new FDA guidelines of people wanting, like, what do we say we need? More protein, okay. And so how do we do that affordably? Well, one of those is like all of the work that's been done in these the foundation that's been laid from really like deeply like funded plant-based meat companies over the past couple years. So it feels impossible until a few things change, and then all of a sudden it's like it's a completely different conversation. Sorry, Steve.
Yes.
No worries. I think that Ari mentioned the first one is, the timeline for VCs is shorter than what biology will actually take. And deep tech, like biological systems, requires time and a lot of perseverance. And that is not just set up very well for a VC investment.
But so how about in terms of your company and the fact that both coffee and chocolate are such high value products, but also commodity products? Does that help in terms of raising funds and kind of getting into the market and getting returns on emails?
It's really important to have a great narrative there, and that narrative needs to include not only the product that you're producing and the profit margin you're going to make, but how you're going to do it. And I come from a biopharmaceutical background where the process is the product, and we've talked a lot about media and cell lines, but really the know-how on how to develop those cell lines and those processes to be scalable and really intensive to produce the products that we need to do requires a lot. And that is where I think we need to spend more time.
I have one final question. I know we ran over a little bit. I'm going to take it just because we started a little bit late. And that's what we're here at Tufts. What do you all think the role of academia is or should be in the future for what you're all trying to do? You want to start? Yeah.
I'll start. I mean, my wife is in academics, or was. And so, I see it as, inspiring students to get into new fields and become entrepreneurs. That's one thing that I do have. I have one college-age daughter, and she's getting a lot of entrepreneurship in college that I never got. And that is where I think is really important for us to think about as we're bringing up new scientists. They need to have this business acumen as well as in-depth scientific knowledge.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, our company wouldn't exist without academia. I mean, it's found a spin out of a academic lab, and the collaboration between our company and Harvard and Tufts and lots of different academic research facilities through the years continues to be an engine for innovation, for talent pipeline, for funding and grant funding in a time of scarce capital. This is a tricky environment as well, but the ability to secure non-dilutive capital through grant funding is often predicated on public-private partnerships where we can do work that leverages relationships in really advanced labs, and so that's incredibly helpful to us. And so building those integrations and the community of finding that connectivity, I think, is a continued growth engine for our company.
Aryé?
In the same way that I think art always precedes science for being able to predict the future, it's the same for academia. And for that reason, also, the confluence of where our understanding of stem cell biology, of tissue engineering, of bioprocess, and everything, even around the sensory sciences, are the only reason we could be here and having these conversations. And all of that came from academia. And it's exactly what Professor Kaplan said in the very beginning, is that we teach for the future and not for the past, and that is why academia is the backbone of what keeps this thing going.
I will end there, and thank you all very much. This has been absolutely fascinating.